it's been a long journey to get the economic inclusion program a part of not just the bond, but moving forward. And I would say that although the information on the presentation was beneficial, I would also would have liked to see a little bit more of your vision. And that's just, I think for me, I would like to see less of what Jacob's doing and really what your thought is. And I just want to say, just, in very cordially, I'm very fond of you. I'm fond of most of our staff here. But the thing I would like for you to really kind of take back from, I think, from Mr. Snow's comments is really sit down and what is your vision for what does this look like beyond Jacob's? And I think that was really what we were looking at. Again, the information is beneficial. We always should be looking at what we've done, who our current and ongoing partners are, and this is wonderful. But when you come back, I just would love to see, Carlos's thoughts of what does this look like as this is your role, and really, put those ideas on paper and really say, okay, this is where we at, and this is where we're at, and this is where we can go with this, integrating into it. And again, and I understand it's very challenging, and this is new for the district, and we're really trying to get engaged with all the community partners. And it can be very intimidating coming up here, and we're asking those hard, critical questions, but that's what we're supposed to do. But I would like to see more of you and less of Jacob's, because I think the background and the experience you bring to this table is going to be very beneficial for us. And so I just want to see you shine through more. As we know, Jacob's won't be here forever, and you have this opportunity to work with Dr. Turnquist and the team to build this into something amazing. So I just wanted to impart that piece of insight for you, and I hope to see what you can bring back. If you have some questions for us, please feel free to reach out and ask those clarifying questions, or send, have Mr. Ray reach out to us, or whatever it is that you need to do, because I want to see you be successful. But this is a very important role for this program is important for me. I'm seeing families of students that are in our district that are saying, oh my gosh, this is the greatest thing ever, and I was able to do X, Y, and Z, and this has helped my family, and this is in effect, my student is being more engaged because there's less home stress because we've had this opportunity. So there are some benefits for our students, but I would like to see the next presentation. I want it to scream out at the page, this is all Mr. Cozart. I want you to tap into that experience. You're here because you have something wonderful, and I want to see you dig deep and really bring that to us, because I don't want to have Mr. Snow coming back and saying, hey, this is what we asked for, because he's going to say that and he's going to ask that, and I'm just going to be very upfront, and I support that. That's what we want to see. Again, I appreciate all of the information. It was very beneficial, and there's some things that I hadn't seen yet, and so that's great. But I just really want you to just own this, and I know Jacob's has been here, but you're team OPS now, so I want to see some team OPS Mr. Cozart in there. And I know you got this, so just, bring it. And we'll be critical of the work, but we're not critical of our staff. That's what we, so don't take, this isn't personal, it's just more about the work, that's all. So thank you.
Thank you for your constructive feedback there, Ms. Williams. And as the slide depicts here, it always seems impossible until it's done. And that's a quote from Nelson Mandela, excuse me. And because this is a paradigm shift for how OPS has done business for 50 years, or the city of Omaha, the state of Nebraska for that matter, it will take some time. It's not going to happen overnight, but I will bring back to you more of Carlos identified in the way ahead, without destroying what has already been put in place by the Jacobs Economic Inclusion team.
Mr. Wayne.
Are we keeping track of data beyond Tier 1, Tier 2? Are we keeping track of data as it relates to gender and minority contractors bidding and also being awarded?
We're not allowed to track by gender and race.
No, we're not allowed to award. based off of that, but we're
Well-
not allowed to attract.
Okay, let me rephrase it. We're not allowed to award by gender or by race, but yes, we are clearly keeping track of that and are very conscious of it. We can certainly report that information to you because many of those Tier 1 vendors especially are minority vendors or women vendors. So if you want us to report that, we can. We cannot award on that basis, but we can report that.
It doesn't have to be in a presentation. I just think it should be something that we should, because we are a public entity, at least review, because if there is de facto discrimination, we can still be a party to that. Yes, and legal counsel is looking, but yes, because the city of Omaha does list black, white, gender. It lists gender and it lists race in their qualifications.
On Tier 1, they will identify. They will say black-owned or women-owned, and yes, and I will tell you right now, that's very important to me.
And thank you. And I just want to make sure we're mindful of it because there could be litigation down the road with the city, and the city's already in some litigation now in federal court regarding their program, but there could be more because when they list those, there could be discrimination among contractors and the city should not be providing that. So I just want to make sure that we're conscious of that, I believe.
Mrs. Fay.
I just want to make sure I understand where you're getting your guidance from. So I'm looking at the not the slideshow, but the PDF that was included in the board materials on e-meetings.
Okay.
And on the second page, there's economic inclusion, strategic goals, alignment with OPS guiding principles. There's 7 items on there. This is before we get to the worksheet documents and those things.
I think it's the template. It's extended, so you would have to drag the window over. Is it this one?
Is it slide 6? Is that the one you're
So are you referring to the,
So you're still on the presentation mode.
It's called Division of District Operational Services, Division of Economic Inclusion, Strategic Goals, and it's the second page. It was an attachment in
Okay, all right.
e-meetings. I didn't name it.
the
so-
document here?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, so the second page, Economic Inclusion, Strategic Goals, Alignment with OPS Guiding Principles. And there's 7 items on there, right? Is that what you're looking at?
Right.
Okay. So is that
Okay.
sort of
Okay.
how you're structuring your own, is that what you're held accountable for, is
Correct. Those
Okay, those
are the
7
goals and objectives that I've established for the Economic Inclusion Division.
Oh, okay.
And the parentheses and the numbers at the end of each of those 7 objectives identify how they line up with the OPS strategic guiding
plan.
principles.
Yeah, okay, so, so you created those in collaboration with Dr. Turnquist, and, yes, okay, so that's what you, that's what you're held accountable for, that's
Yes.
how we measure whether you're doing your job or not, okay, got it. So, all right, that helps me. And then I just want to be really clear, so if this is what I heard Dr. Turnquist say, so everything that was in that RFQ, everything that the REACH program presents itself as doing, everything that Davis was doing, this is all wrapped into this role, and so the district sees no need to pursue any of those things. This is correct?
Okay, so to address your
Wait,
question,
Wait, okay. So, and then I also want to make sure that if that's the case, that, because there was, in particular with REACH, it was so widely reported that we would be participating in that. I mean, it was always implied in the paper that we were, OPS hasn't committed yet, but this is how it's laid out, and it's got these partners, if it's going to, so I just want to make sure that we're really clear here for the public that if we are definitively saying we are not participating in REACH, or that I'm clear on that.
Okay, so as I indicated, this presentation addressed each of the 10 items that were listed in the RFQ. I stated that the services that Economic Inclusion Division, or OPS, does not have the embedded capability to provide is credit remediation, bonding, and insurance. But what my office does is provide information to small emerging businesses on service providers who have identified that capability and
those things.
wraparound services. Yes. So we have a list of, you know, you need equipment. Here's the 10 folks that identify themselves as equipment providers. You need insurance. Here's a list of companies that have identified themselves as an insurance or bonding companies. And we provide that information out to the Tier 1s and Tier 2s that communicate or, you know, that are partners with OPS.
Okay,
And as far as REACH, if that's the case, any other service provider out there will be, yes, there's a cost for them to become a complement to what we're doing. There are things that we are doing in conjunction with the Chamber and with Nebraska Business Development and in conjunction with Metro Community College, whether it's, you know, identifying training, blocks of instruction that can make small emerging business more efficient business owners. So there are things that we're not doing internally, but we've established relationships with external agencies that can provide that service at no cost. So that's what I've identified.
and that's what all the partnerships and things that you listed on there, and that was really, really clear. And this topic, the board knows, I have struggled with because I came from zero knowledge and have, you know, I've worked pretty hard to try and understand it. So I'm sorry, you just have to spell it out for me. The district is not going to recommend that we participate in the REACH program. There's no recommendation from the district to participate in the REACH program.
There's no recommendation from us at this time to do anything like that. If down the road we find that we think there is some advantage to accessing some services from any entity that would cost the district anything, we would come to the board with that and share that with you.
So no current recommendation, and we are no longer going month to month with Davis.
That would end with this month.
That ends with this month, and there's no recommendation to continue to go month to month with Davis.
No.
Okay. I just wanted to be really, really clear, because I'm a little slow on this, and
And again, we would come to the board if we saw any need to access
Right.
anything that would cost the district anything.
Of course.
But as Mr. Cozart says, so many of the groups that he has reached out to already, who provide wraparound services for many of these small emerging businesses, are at no charge to us.
Right. Okay.
Okay, and the one thing that I was really impressed with when I sat through the CM at Risk was kind of to your question, Mrs. Fay. So many of those providers came with lists that they were giving to the subcontractors of financing options or insurance or bonding. So I think that's been in existence in the community from the GCs, and so I thought that was that was eye-opening for me to see as they did their presentations at the CM at Risk. Dr. Turnquist, and I have one question.
If I could just reemphasize that, one of the really uplifting things we have seen is the communication we've had with general contractors to get them on board to actually help us promote small emerging businesses. We've done a great deal to unbundle projects so that they are smaller for some of the smaller businesses and they can handle it. The fact that the general contractors have so gotten on board with that and are enthusiastic about working with us on that is something that's never happened before.
And I hope you understand, I wasn't, Billy was asking very practical questions. What is it you do? What is it you're held accountable for? I think you made that clear. I would like to, continue to see hard goals in these 7, measurable things in these 7
Objectives.
objectives,
Yes.
thank you, so that, you can, we can really, see how we're meeting these 7 objectives. But, so that's, I was really just trying to wrap my head around, okay, this is what you're doing, this is what you're held accountable for, and then answer some of those questions that were brought up back in November or whenever that was, and where we're going forward. Wasn't questioning necessarily in this line of questioning anyway, necessarily the quality of what it is that you all have done, so.
Sorry for not better explaining the enclosures that were provided there.
It's hard for, it's mutual, because it's hard for me to articulate sometimes what it is I'm trying to say about something that I am not a master of.
Okay, and with that, on the Tableau piece, could you just get back to us with how you will be presenting that, and if that'll be similar to Open Book, or will it be just documents that we can access? I know I go to Open Book and look up things for constituents at different points in time when they ask. So if you could just explain how you're going to use Tableau in that to us, that would be great.
Okay.
And with that, I think if we don't have any more questions, we're going to move on to action items. J2, thank you so much for your presentation. I'm going to move this around just a little bit. So we're going to do J2A, legislative update, and then I believe we have an out-of-town person here. Is that correct, on the social worker piece? Okay. All right, so then we'll stay with the agenda as it is. So J2A, legislative update, I will call on Mrs. Fay.
All right. And I think, there he is. Okay, I couldn't see you hiding behind the lectern. So if you open, is the matrix? Oh, I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong thing. Sorry about that. I'm going to let Mr. Lindsay do most of the talking. We're in the last month of the session, and there's a lot of things happening. We're going to ask you tonight to consider taking action on LB 1067. If you open the matrix, it's on page 2024. Which I'm scrolling down to. And it's highlighted in yellow. So this is Senator Sullivan's bill regarding the learning community. Initially, we had opposed it because it didn't meet all of the parameters that we had outlined in our learning community statement, position statement that we adopted as a board. Since then, it's come out of committee. There's been an amendment that I'll let Mr. Lindsay talk about, 2549, which includes an extreme poverty adjustment and an LEP growth adjustment, that should that amendment be attached or adopted for LB 1067, then we're recommending that you change your position to support. But let's start with that, because that's the biggest one, Mr. Lindsay. Let's talk about that. And then the other, I know he's got several bills to talk about, but I also want to make sure that we talk about, and that you're aware of LB 930, which is the testing, the NISA test bill that would just have 11th graders take one test as opposed to all of the NISA tests. And we had some questions about that, and so Mr. Lindsay's going to talk about the answers to that and where that stands right now.
LB 1067 was one of the learning community bills that was introduced by Senator Sullivan. I apologize, it's allergy season. There were several of those learning community bills that were introduced. Senator Sullivan's is the only bill that came out of committee with a priority designation, so it will appear on the agenda at some point in the relatively near future. In working with that bill, the bill does several things. It primarily would eliminate the common levy, reduce the size of the coordinating council, convert open enrollment to option enrollment. It would provide require community achievement plans and would provide a community achievement plan adjustment. That community achievement plan adjustment does not come near what would appear to be the board's need for additional resources for poverty, and the board does currently have a position opposed to the bill. What the legislative committee considered was an amendment that was worked on through Connie, developing an extreme poverty adjustment, which would allow additional poverty resources for districts that have 40% or more poverty free lunch students, with the intent being that those additional dollars should go to those districts where poverty is at such a level that it's not easily absorbed into the general population of the district. So the amendment referenced in that policy, excuse me, the amendment referenced in that policy would provide this extreme poverty adjustment, which would be statewide. It would apply to quite a few districts around the state, such as Grand Island and Lexington, Scottsbluff, Hastings, a lot of districts that also have the higher levels of poverty, although really only one approaches the OPS level of poverty. But it would provide that statewide. The current version of 1067 applies that only within the learning community. The second change that would make is to take out that community achievement plan adjustment and focus the aid primarily on the extreme poverty adjustment. And then finally, it adds in another component from the superintendent's plan that this board voted on in, I believe, December of 2014, and that is the inclusion of additional ELL funding. And again, Connie has drafted an an English language learners student growth adjustment, with the goal of that adjustment being to provide additional resources to, it's separate from the student growth adjustment, which simply provides additional dollars for growth over 1%. This adjustment would be at a smaller level, but intended to apply, offset the needs generated, the additional needs that would be generated by the growing ELL population. So those are the changes that would be included in the in the amendment.
Can I stop you right there for 1 second?
Yes.
Thank you. So I want you to do two things for the board. Can we get Mr. Lindsay some water, please? Thank you.
Prefer scotch, but no, thank you.
Butterscotch.
I just have these
is what
allergies.
he meant.
I have these allergies. It's just gonna.
Butterscotch.
That's because my wife makes me do yard work, and it's just wrong.
Okay. Two things. One, I think we had a dollar amount, right, Connie, that you can, so would like her to explain that, and then just for the board, because some of this gets sort of jargony, if maybe you could explain the difference between an allowance and an adjustment and why one is more beneficial for us as a district than the other. So whichever one of you wants to go first.
An allowance is something that's subtracted from your general fund operating expenditures, and when you're compared to the districts in your array, If you have an allowance for something that hasn't been there before, it would cause all of the districts in your grouping to have a lower basic funding per student. So adjustments are something that gets added on after you calculate basic funding per student. That way it doesn't negatively affect the districts that you're in your comparison group.
Is that, I don't know if that's helpful. I had that question when we first started talking about all this at some point last year, so, okay. And then maybe talk about the dollar amount that we're looking at with,
For the limited English proficiency student growth adjustment, it is based on your estimate of how much your refugee or your ELL population is going to grow each year. And we've had significant increases in our population of ELL students. So currently, the student growth adjustment gives you an increase if you have more than a 1% growth in your student population. So that would be 520 students for us to have any growth in students. But sometimes we have growth in students even without the number increasing like that because we have refugee and immigrant students locating here in the Omaha area. So this proposal is to separate that out and recognize that when you have an influx of students that have needs on, language barriers or whatever their issue may be, that gives additional funding to districts that have that kind of growth. And that would be statewide, not just for Omaha. And when I calculated it for Omaha, just based on this amendment, it would give us an additional $800,000. And I didn't calculate it for all the other districts because I don't know what their ELL population is, but I know that Grand Island is similar to Omaha in their growth in ELL populations. Crete has growth. South Sioux City, all of the, where there's a large concentration of immigrant population, they have those kind of increases coming that it's hard to cover when they first come in, because the way state aid works is it's a year in arrears, so you have the students show up and then you don't get the money until later. Student growth allows you to anticipate what that growth's going to be, and so then you get that additional aid, but it doesn't do anything for the growing population of immigrants that come to the district that we maybe hadn't anticipated or didn't have enough staff to cover their particular needs. And then the extreme poverty adjustment, that applies across the state, not just to OPS, and it's a calculation based on a percentage of the statewide average basic funding per student. So it would, as the basic funding per student increases year to year, so would that extreme poverty adjustment. And we use the 40% because that's a proven indicator that anything above 40% has additional needs when you have poverty students.
I think you also, were you asking, did that answer your question with regard to numbers?
well,
Those numbers you were looking
did you,
The adjustment, if it were to be adopted as drafted, would result in about $8.4 million for OPS. I think the statewide cost would be somewhere around $19 million.
and that 8.4, that's both the LAP and the poverty?
No,
That's just the poverty?
That's just the poverty.
Okay.
The LEP would be approximately $800,000 for OPS. As Connie mentioned, we don't know what a statewide number would be on that. But there's other districts that have indicated that they would like to support a statewide approach to higher poverty levels as well, rather than just as the bill currently stands, just a metro-focused effort, and that effort being at a lower level than what would be proposed in this amendment.
So now where does it stand? The amendment, where does the amendment stand?
The amendment has not been filed. It's kind of waiting to be brought, it's brought to the OPS board to see where the OPS board would stand on it. It would likely be filed in the next day or two. The bill is, LB 1067 is not on the agenda tomorrow. There's another bill on the agenda that I'll get to in a bit that is on the agenda tomorrow. But it's, the board's position would certainly affect our strategy in what, how to approach the bill.
I think this is the only action item. Do you want Tim to go through everything, or do you want to take action on this now?
Why don't we go ahead and take action? So if you want to make a motion for us, that would be great.
So for the committee, I recommend that we change our position on LB 1067 from oppose to support should Amendment 2549 be adopted. I feel like there should be something in there that says, and nothing else in the,
I mean, what I'm reading from the direction I'm getting from your motion is that this amendment is a necessity and it can't be loaded down with other negative stuff.
So that as 2549 is adopted as it's...
As drafted.
As drafted, thank you. That's the language, as drafted. There we go.
And that is, I think it's attached to your materials for your reference.
Yes, it is.
Is there a second?
Second.
So motion by Mrs. Fay, second by Ms. Williams, that the board move their position from oppose to support only if AM 2549 is adopted as drafted. Is there any discussion? Mr. Evans.
Just a note, I had several meetings last week with senators, specifically some senators in relationship to the Education Committee, and there is a real desire to support something statewide as opposed to just the learning community. So I know there is, and I don't know the level of support when it comes down to voting, but I had several of them share with me that they thought that made more sense. The fiscal note's always the challenge, but they understood that we're not the only ones with ELL students. There is Crete, there is Grand Island, although they don't have 17,600, which we do, and they don't have 2,000 refugees. No one has that kind of number, but so we're the biggest number. The number that Connie gave you will be by far, just by sheer volume, it's going to be the biggest number statewide. But there's still support that I think would help us with this amendment, should the board choose to go this direction.
Is there any other questions, conversation, discussion? Okay, seeing none, roll call, please.
Scanlon. Aye. Snow.
Aye.
Vargas.
Aye.
Wayne. Williams.
Aye.
Fay.
Aye.
Goding.
Aye.
7-0.
Okay, motion carries. With that, we'll go on with, I think, the rest of Mr. Lindsay's presentation.
The other two bills, I'll touch on the one that Mrs. Fay mentioned. LB 930 is a speaker priority bill, which is on general file. It's the first level of debate. Speaker priority bill means it's still has a chance of being debated. Speaker priority bills are typically scheduled late in the day. They started tonight at 6 o'clock and worked for about an hour on them and advanced, I think, 3 bills. So there's a chance to get, that they do get adopted, or that they do get debated. As Mrs. Fay mentioned, this bill would replace the junior year 11th grade NISA test with a college placement exam. The State Board of Education would designate what the exam would be. That would be administered then by the school districts. School districts would be reimbursed by the state for costs in excess of what the district is currently paying to administer the NISA tests. Those dollars would come, at least initially, from lottery dollars, and then in the next biennium, NDE would be required to request those as part of their general fund appropriation. So the bottom line is that it should be, it should not cost the district additional dollars. There were discussions in the legislative committee, questions about whether the district would have to provide transportation because the test is typically given on a Saturday. What we understand, Mr. Evans had and others had discussions with Lincoln, which was a pilot project for this program, and at that level of number of tests being given, the college placement companies will work with the districts to provide those on the exams on weekdays. There would be an additional cost, as I understand it, to the district for, I believe, the calculators that would be required for or are allowed to be used during those exams. That bill is on the first level of debate. It will be, I'm guessing, debated sometime in the next 3 weeks, counting this week. That's where we stand. We're on day 46, finished day 46 of a 60-day session today. There are, Speaker admonished the legislature today that we had 48 priority bills at some level of priority that had not yet been debated, with those really 13 days to advance to final reading, because the Constitution requires that that's all the only final reading can be done in the last 2 days. That is LB 930. Ms. Fay, I don't want you to do, if you want me to go on or if there are questions about it. Okay, LB 1066 is on the agenda tomorrow, although there's some pretty controversial stuff before it, so I doubt we get to it. 1066 is the Nebraska Department of Education cleanup bill. The committee amendments were not really a concern to us, with the exception of one of interest. Most of those amendments were technical in nature, but there is an amendment that will require the resident district to reimburse the option district for special educations incurred by the option student. I think Connie has done some research on that as far as numbers of students and what that might entail. And Connie, we're guessing it's close to a wash. Is that given the numbers of students that we have? There might be some there might be some instances of us having to pay large dollars for students, but over the large numbers of students that we have, it should be pretty much a wash.
We do have a lot of students that reside in OPS that are special needs students, so we have some opting in and some opting out, but it probably would be pretty much a wash.
Then there's the other significant bill for OPS is LB 447. That is at final reading and probably will be read on final reading either later on this week or sometime next week. And it looks like it's in, right now, that it's in shape that it will pass. There's very quickly LB 883 that would have provided foundation aid that would have been having a disequalizing effect on districts like OPS. That was killed by the Education Committee. LB 958, which was the Revenue Committee portion of the governor's property tax plan, had a lot of stuff that in it that would have been detrimental to OPS. All of those provisions would be removed by an amendment that will have a hearing on Thursday. It'd be down to the only educational impact it would have would be on community college, general fund, expenditure growth limitation, and then it would put additional dollars into the property tax credit fund. And then LB 959, which is the education side of the governor's property tax relief plan. Most of the stuff, all of the stuff that is detrimental to OPS has been removed from that bill. There's, I think there's some provisions that that would be disequalizing, but not, would not have a direct negative impact on OPS. And that would be elimination of the minimum levy adjustment, which is limits your equalization aid if you don't get to a specified level in your levy. And then removing the levy qualification from the averaging adjustment, which will increase the overall cost of TIOSA, but it will not decrease TIOSA that OPS receives. And then the one that would impact OPS, but probably not significant, is a limitation on QC, the Qualified Capital Purpose Undertaking Fund bonding provisions. OPS right now uses about, I think it was 1.9 cents of right now a limitation of 5.2 cents, and that will reduce to 3 cents. So it could have a longer-term impact on OPS, but not anything in the short term as far as how that limitation would affect us. And that is the extent of the bills, and that's really all that's pending, or all that's left for this session. As I mentioned, the session will be done. It'll be finished. I think the last day is April 20th, but legislation that's going to pass will have advanced to final reading a week prior to that. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, so no questions? All right. Thank you very much for being here and helping us through that. Okay, next item on the agenda, I think we have some outside folks here for this, so it's J2B, Capital Facility Assessment Agreement between OPS and DLR. Dr. Turnquist.
Thank you, Mrs. Godding. At the last board meeting, the board approved the DLR as the partner for the capital facility assessment and asked us to go back and negotiate terms for a contract, which would include a reduction in cost, a reduction in facilities addressed, and also to bring back some examples of the added value of the DLR process that would be followed. So I would just begin by saying that the reduction in cost is approximately $120,000, to be precise, $119,600. The facilities, the reduction in facilities to be assessed will be from 90 to 65, and that will not include any new schools that have been built within the last 5 years or schools that are undergoing major renovations, additions in the current bond. And the added value that we would point out very quickly, with the DLR proposal, the district receives 5 times the number of specialists. That includes architects, mechanical engineers, electrical engineers. That means 20 specialists instead of 4 specialists. Twice the number of teams inspecting facilities, 4 teams rather than 2 teams. 2.5 times the number of specialists on a team, 5 on each team instead of 2 on a team. A more robust, detailed inspection of every site. In other words, that will be inspection of the entirety of each site instead of a representative sampling of rooms and spaces in a site. Full engagement with building principals and head engineers to assess day-to-day perceptions on facility adequacy, and also to inform principals and head engineers as to how the process will progress. A full review of existing OPS documentation on facilities, full engagement of buildings and ground staff, an initial piloting of 3 schools, 1 at each grade level, elementary, middle, and high school, to check for the complete adequacy of the reporting process at the outset of the assessment. Tier 1, Tier 2 participation of 7 to 10% for consulting services, and the provision of an in-depth facility conditions inventory that will be uploadable into the district's facility management software system, the TMA system, so there will be no need for the district to buy a new software system. And now we'd like to move to Mr. Tom Penny, who has a guest with him, and he's going to introduce. They are from DLR, and they would like to show you how their process rolls out.
Thank you, Dr. Turnquist. I am Tom Penny. I'm here this evening with Pat Phelan. Together, we're representing DLR Group. We will go through a brief explanation of the team that we've put together for this project, talk to you a little bit about our specific approach, explain by showing some examples the level of data that would then be available as a result of this assessment process. So the team that we've put together includes, in addition to the resources of our firm, also another engineering firm, another Omaha engineering firm, Ferris Engineering, and then four additional consulting firms that are both either Tier 1 or Tier 2 firms. These include 21 Delta Engineers for part of the engineering assessment, the old Anderson Architecture, Shotgun House Designers, and Building Cost Consultants. So together, this team would be involved collaboratively in this process. The process that we identified when we responded to the RFP includes 6 basic steps. The graphic is a little confusing perhaps, but we're just intending to show that some of those steps actually occur concurrently. So it starts with an organization process that would really be a time frame to identify the key team members on part of Omaha Public Schools that would be involved, some specific details of scheduling, closer identification of the data that's already available to us, and as we'll show you in a minute, clarification of definition of prioritization details and some of the details that will go into the assessment that would allow this database to eventually be queried the way that OPS will want to query that database. The second step then begins a process of reviewing documentation you already have, records that are available, prior engineering studies that are available, working with buildings and grounds staff. We've also identified as a third step what we're calling a self-assessment phase that would involve collecting information from building principals, from specific building engineers that would help guide and kind of prioritize some of the field assessment work so that we don't miss anything when we're on site doing those field assessments. Then, as Dr. Turnquist mentioned, I think a very important phase, which would really be a pilot assessment of 3 facilities, an elementary, a middle school, and a high school. It would be a thorough assessment of those facilities meeting the guidelines that have been established. We would put that into a database. We would then be able to test that data. We'd be able to confirm that we're meeting all of the expectations of the school district, all of the expectations of buildings and grounds with that assessment, give us the opportunity to make some adjustments in the process or in the reporting if we need to do that before we complete the assessment of the remaining, what would be 62 buildings. Then obviously completing all of the on-site assessment work. We'll talk in a minute about the teams that we would establish to do that and how that would be accomplished. And as a part, even as soon as the assessments begin, there would be a continual process of documentation and review of that data as we're continually collecting the data in all of the facilities.
As Dr. Turnquist mentioned, one of the key aspects of our approach is just our team structure and the logistics of how we're going to gather the information in the on-site evaluation. So, as she mentioned, we'll be proposing 4 teams of 5 professional individuals. And I think that the thing that we feel is really important from our experience in working on facility assessments, both here locally and regionally and nationally, is having design professionals that are familiar with schools, boots on the ground, that are actually in the buildings doing those assessments so that we can get the most accurate and consistent information as we gather that information. So again, we'll have a team of 5 individuals, a civil engineer, 2 architects. It'll be one kind of looking on the exterior envelope of the building, another architect kind of focused on the interior finishes, a mechanical engineer, looking at plumbing and HVAC, and then electrical, looking at power, lighting, and special systems. So again, a very comprehensive look in terms of the team that we'd be putting together for looking at each of these buildings. The next slide here just is a very kind of summary of the criteria that we'll be looking at in kind of three different categories. The first one being just the category of the assessment. So for example, is it a building code related item or a life and safety related item? Is it a maintenance and operations, or is it energy performance? So we'll look at each of the different building systems, categorize them by those three categories, and then determine a repair level where you see starting at level 4, which would be a complete replacement of that system or that component, all the way down to a level 0, which would basically say there is no needed work done on that particular component. And then also being able to sort all of these different assessments by priority. So you'll see on the right-hand or on the left-hand side of the slide there, starting with priority 1 being immediate and critical need items, all the way down to priority 4, which would be more long-term, kind of 5 to 10-year time horizon in terms of the improvements that would be needed. So we can, again, of all the different building systems that we'll be looking at, we can determine what level of category it falls within, the repair level, and then also the priority. So we can, and then be able to sort that database according to those different systems and priorities and repair levels. The next couple slides just show a couple examples of a kind of a deliverable. This would be just one example of some of the documentation that would be provided to the Buildings and Grounds folks as well as to you as a board. Tom's going to share with you here in a minute more of an executive summary that would probably be more pertinent for you as a board members as we bring this information back to you. But this one just shows, for example, looking at plumbing systems in a building. We will provide some graphic, photographs to help document the different issues that we identify. And then the next slide just shows, again, some other items such as boilers and window systems and things like that.
So collecting this data from each building allows us, obviously, some summary information. And in this example, I'll show you some details of this, but within the request for proposal from the school district, the school district identified actually 25 assessment criteria. So these 25 are listed across in that spreadsheet. In our response to that proposal, we suggested that, well, number one, we confirmed that I think there was a very appropriate identification of the 25 key systems and buildings that can require major maintenance and justify long-term planning for that maintenance. We, however, identified up to 98 assessment criteria that would be applicable to those 25 assessment items. So, for example, one of the items was boilers. So within the boiler category, I think we've identified preliminarily, and this would be the information we'd be reviewing during the organizational phase of our work, but we've identified, I think, 12 or 13 items within that boiler category, because it's not enough to just look at the boiler and say, yes, that's a hot water boiler and it has this capacity and it's 30 years old. We need to look at the burner, we need to look at the flue, we need to look at the controls, we need to look at combustion air. We need to provide more detail that provides a higher level of maintenance and maintenance planning information that's related to that item. So of the 25 items that were defined in the RFP, we have preliminarily suggested that list actually gets expanded to properly define all those, expanded to a list of about 98. But in summary, the summary would be based on these 25 items. Each item for every school would indicate the priority level. So the school district could sort by priority level. If you want to sort a priority level that says we want to look at all maintenance that's been identified in the next 5 years, you could sort that. If you want to know immediate maintenance within a year, you could sort that. But again, that criteria and the details for those priority levels will be further identified in the organizational phase of our work. So for each building, then that rolls up to a summary that, from a cost perspective, identifies critical maintenance requirements in terms of total dollars for that building. It would identify recommended maintenance within the next year, and then another 5-year and a 10-year increment, and then obviously the total cost that's identified for the maintenance and/or replacement of those critical systems. So that's kind of a general explanation of our approach and samples of the reporting documentation. And I think with that, we would just like to address any questions that you might have.
Does anyone have any questions at this time on that? I don't know if we have any questions, but I just think back to the last board meeting and some of the comments that Mrs. Underwood and Ms. Merica shared, and just wanted to, kind of come back to some of those, which were comments related to a session they had been at Gray City Schools, where they were actually given the cost of not addressing maintenance issues and the detriment that can be. And so I guess I just think that's extremely important in thinking about being a good steward of the resources that we have in our buildings, and thinking about comments that I know I heard from constituents when we were going through this bond in 14 of, where's your routine maintenance and where's your scheduling at? And that's something that we haven't had as a district, and I think in talking to Mr. Evans, it's something that most districts do have. And so I just think it's a priority. I've had principals come up to me and constituents saying, oh, this is really important to us that you're looking at the buildings that either our kids are in, or as far as principals, the buildings that they're trying to manage, and recognizing some of the challenges that they face. So, Dr. Turnquist?
I think that it is multifold in terms of its advantages, because it does allow you to do that current necessary maintenance. The way that you can sort this, the board will be allowed to do short-range financial planning, long-range financial planning in relation to facilities, as well as to use this in anticipation of any future bonds.
And I know that was one of the things that I talked about last time, was just the challenge when you sit on the budget committee of what your real needs are, because we really don't know today. So I don't know if there's any other questions that anyone has or comments. If not, at this time, Ms. Williams?
I just wanted to thank you both for coming and really explaining the process. The last time this information was presented was more from the staff, so it was really nice to hear from you and how detailed that you will be looking at this. I think that gives me even more clarity. So I just really wanted to thank you for taking some time out. I know it's a late night, but for staying and really helping us understand the detail of what you all have proposed to do for our buildings, which very much impacts student achievement. So I'm excited to see what this final vote looks like.
So at this time, I would entertain a motion to approve an agreement with DLR Group, Inc. to perform a capital facility study of designated district facilities.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
So motion by Ms. Williams, second by Mr. Scanlon, to approve an agreement with DLR Group to perform a capital facility study of designated district facilities. Mr. Wayne?
I watched it last time. I believe it was presented online, but I'm having a hard time recalling. I'm just going to ask Mr. Scanlon, I know you had some questions or concerns last time about the contract. Can you just summarize them for me again?
I had issue that we were going out for all 90 of our facilities and not narrowing it down to the facilities that have recently been renovated, not the ones that would be under construction at this time because this contract has a completion date of September of this year. So we'd have a number of schools that were in the process of renovations, and I did not, my problem was that we should have had it presented to where this number of schools that we wanted inspected and looked at. And that was the issue that I had.
So was the scope changed from the initial RFQ to this contract?
So yes, so Dr. Turnquist, can you go back through that again, I think?
Yes, we reduced the number of buildings that would be looked at from 90 to 65.
I won't be supporting this contract. I remember the discussion, I just couldn't remember everything, and not that I'm supporting it, but I think changing the scope after we narrowed it down causes some issues for me.
Dr. Turnquist?
It is professional services, and it's much as we do with architect engineering contracts, where we then refine the agreement and renegotiate pricing based on those refinements.
But from 90 to what, 60?
90 to
65?
65.
That's a significant jump. And I think if there was a professional service contract to do an architect for a school, and there was a third change in scope, that would definitely be a change order that came before us. If that architect was already employed, I think that's just my take on it.
Any other thoughts? Ms. Williams?
I will obviously be supporting this, and I appreciate Dr. Turnquist and DLR's willingness to really sit down and kind of hash out the details of it. I know Mr. Scanlon was very aware and conscious of the 90, so I appreciate the drop in buildings, which will save us more money. But for me, the thing that stands out the most is Mrs. Underwood's comments and Ms. Merica's comments, as well as if we wait to do this, we will, in essence, be spending more money to solve these issues. If we do this now, we're saving money over the long haul. We are having safer, healthier buildings for our students to be in. And so I just wanted to thank all parties for their willingness to really look at the contract and make those adjustments.
And I'm going to be voting in support of it as well, primarily because I recognize the need for sometimes a safety issue that may come up that we're not aware of in buildings, and I want to ensure that we're addressing those particular issues as soon as possible, and knowing that some of the buildings in my area have things that are starting to happen, and I'd prefer that we were doing preventative maintenance versus that we were being proactive versus reactive, which I think is what maybe has happened in the past. Dr. Turnquist?
Well, the other thing to consider is that we're looking at the cost per square foot, which doesn't change. When we did the RFQ, request for qualifications, that is asking primarily for the qualifications of the staff that will be on site to do this work and the quality of the process that has been proposed by that particular vendor. There was only one other proposal that approached the quality, and that was in excess of $1.7 million.
Any other comments? If not, roll call, please, Mr. Ray.
Scanlon.
Aye.
Snow.
Aye.
Vargas.
Aye.
Wayne.
Not voting.
Williams.
Aye.
Fay.
Aye.
Godin.
Aye.
6 ayes.
Motion carries. Thank you very much for being here, and thank you for
Thank you for
presenting
your
to
time.
us. With that, we're going to move on to J2C Social Work Program Expansion Update. I want to thank all of you who have stayed so patiently till 10:47 to present on this topic, and so I feel like we got a lot of information through public comment, so please go ahead. And I know they stayed. They want to go home too, so. You don't have to read us the slides. We've read them, so whatever information you need to provide to us, though, that we don't have, would be great. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you. Perfect. Madam President, Superintendent, members of the board, thank you for having us, and you're here late too. So we wanted to come back and define more specifically role as well as specific input from social workers in our schools so you could hear from them in terms of what we are doing. So we'll introduce the team behind me shortly. I'm going to flip through the PowerPoint pretty quickly. You can see the first slide comes from the Kids Count Nebraska report, really indicating poverty issues throughout the state. The second slide is specific to OPS. I'll just highlight that we've got a 73% poverty rate based on free and reduced lunch. Probably what matters most is that 90% of that 73% is free. And so that's significant as a poverty indicator. The other thing I'll mention on the slide is that we have the absence rates of 36% for 10 or more days. Well, why do those things matter in terms of the impact of poverty? It's because of adverse childhood experiences, what it does for brain development, what it does for chronic stress, what it does to have those repeated toxic environmental issues happen on a repeated basis, and how that impacts learning. And that's where the social worker comes in, because they help address those, whether it's dealing with medical issues or abuse, neglect issues, those kinds of things that occur as a result of environmental effect. So adverse childhood experiences is a common term you'll see out there frequently, and we wanted you to be familiar with it because that's what our children are coming to school with and frequently challenged by. So let me get to the specifics. On slide 5, what impact does that have on student success? Well, you can see for some kids, they can be resilient regardless of the environment. They might have one parent that can buffer them, or the other parent, or perhaps a parent with only one job, and that's fantastic. But for many kids dealing with the chronic stress that happens as a result of poverty, there's lots of impacts. I'll just focus on one of the bullets midway through. It says poor dental and physical health. And I'll give you 2 examples that jump out at us. 80% of our kids that are in poverty probably have some form of teeth decay that an external agency or referral could support. Our nurses are telling us 1/3 of the kids that they get glasses for don't come back next fall. Those are just a couple of examples. You'll hear many more in terms of the colleagues behind me. Our Lincoln Public Schools team could not be here, but they did offer to come back at a later time if that would be of interest. I will tell you, I talked with Dr. James Stavum, my counterpart in Lincoln, and she did mention that there's 29 school social workers, K through 12, in their school districts. So I can give you that piece of information and certainly forward on other things if you would be interested. But what I would like to jump into are the people who you've been waiting to hear from. And I'd like to really thank Carrie Collins. Carrie Collins, she's our principal at Kellam Elementary, and she and her family support worker, Shannon Woodard, are going to talk to you about some of their experiences and what they're doing in regards to additional supports for families around this topic. If I could invite Carrie and Shannon, I'll let you share the microphone.
Good evening. So I just wanted to share that at Kellam Elementary, we have a full-time family support worker, and that is Shannon, and she supports our early childhood families. And I know Shannon will speak to the specifics of what she does, the ins and outs of her jobs on a daily basis. But what I see, the family support worker position is very similar to a social worker position. And I see that it truly is a link or the glue to connecting our students and families, especially our families in crisis, to the services and resources that they need. Shannon's daily work is all about focusing on the well-being of the whole child. and identifying the strengths of the students and families and working with the families and the school staff to eliminate any barriers that interfere with their overall school success. At Kellum, we're an early childhood through 6th grade building, and currently we don't have family support workers supporting kindergarten through 6th grade. But I know that if we did, it would be a positive impact on the other families and students that we serve. As the principal, I often say to our staff, we accept every student just as they are, with open arms, but our support can't stop with the child. We have to find ways to extend and stretch our arms of support around the family as well. On a daily basis, we're faced with students and families in crisis situations, and yes, our focus still remains on the academics. But we can't successfully support a child in their academic growth, especially a student in crisis, without taking into account the support of their social, emotional, and behavioral concerns and involving the family to accomplish this. To give you a sense of what the needs of our students and families look like, I wanted to read something that I actually read to our staff at the beginning of the year in my opening presentation. It's entitled, If Our Students Could Share Their Stories, What Would They Say and How Would We Respond? And these are actual stories from Kellum Elementary students. I am 7 years old. I moved to Omaha, Nebraska in May after the earthquakes in Nepal. During the earthquakes, I lost several of my family, including my mom and dad. I now live with my aunt, uncle, 3 cousins, and 2 siblings. Even though I lived in poverty, I was a very happy child, and I was very much a daddy's girl. I'm sad a lot, and sometimes I think I've used all my tears crying about my mom and dad, especially at night. Sometimes you'll see me staring off in class. Please don't think I'm not paying attention. I'm just thinking about my mom and dad and how much I miss them. Please understand my hurt, and please connect me to someone that can help me understand how to handle this pain and loss at such a very young age. Kellum Elementary, can you help me? How will we respond? I am a 5-year-old. I just moved to Omaha, Nebraska 2 weeks ago with my mom and dad and 2 older sisters. Before I came to America, I lived in the refugee camp in Thailand. Before arriving at the refugee camp, my entire family had to flee our village in Burma in the middle of the night to find safety away from the violence of the war. Life in the refugee camp was safer, but I wasn't able to get much education. When I come to your classrooms, I will be very high energy. And a lot of that comes from my anxiety of being in such a violent situation during the war in Burma. Please be patient with me, because I don't understand how to listen or follow the classroom rules. Kellum Elementary, will you support and give me and my family support, because my behavior often causes a struggle at home too. How will we respond? I am an 8-year-old going into the 3rd grade. I'm not sure how I feel about starting a new school, because I've been in a new school every year since kindergarten. I live at 2 houses. I spend time with my mom, and then on weekends I spend time with my dad. My dad is remarried and they have 2 other kids. I don't think my stepmom likes me very much, because she's mean to me. She doesn't treat me the same as her other kids. It makes me very sad. I want to do well in school because it makes my mom happy when I get good grades. But in school, sometimes I like to do things for attention. I like to suck my thumb and stomp my feet when things don't go my way, because I'm just starving for attention. A lot of my tantrums stem from the fact that the adults in my life aren't quite sure how to interact with me. They make sure that I have all the needs, all the things that I need, but no one really talks to me or spends time with me. Kellum staff, please help me to make choices that support positive behavior and find ways to get positive attention. Can you help me? Can you work with my parents on how to better support me at home? How will we respond? Well, how will we respond is the question. These are just 3 stories. I could give you many more. I feel the support of a social worker for all grade levels will be an important part of our team, and that we will be able to immediately respond to the needs of our students' families and truly make an impact on the whole child and the whole family. And I'll have Shannon step forward and just talk about specifics of her position and give an example of families that she serves.
So my name is Shannon Woodard, and I'm a family support worker at Kellum Elementary, and my role as family support worker is vast. I wear several hats in this position. I came into this position about 6 months ago, and there are several areas of high need that I help children and families maneuver through on a daily basis. There is a high need for family in general and for the child on a social emotional level. When a child's basic need is not met, by that food, water, and shelter, there's a breakdown in that child's emotional well-being, and this affects and affects the child's education. My job is to serve as a bridge to and for the family to help them get the resources that they need so they are successful as a parent, so their child is successful in their education. There are high concerns and challenges around custody with parents and their children in the families that I serve. You have a lot of families who are in survival mode and flight mode. You have children who do not have a stable sense of security and attachment due to all the stressors that they are facing in their daily routines and home environments. I feel as a family support worker, the challenges families are facing are of major concern. I have done extensive and intensive work with several families that I serve. I help families advocate for themselves as I advocate for them when it comes to IEPs, IFPs, SATs, and MDTs. I help families with utility assistance and custody cases. I provide social services, help, and assistance. I provide family preservation to families in need. I worked with a family that had a high need for social services and family preservation. The child was acting out in his classroom due to going through a challenging custody case, and he needed a safe environment where I, as the family support worker, could find his good. What was motivating this child to act out and behave the way he was behaving? I was able to find his good and build his trust in the process as a result with an excellent team of teaching and teaching support staff. I am now happy to report he is thriving and doing better than he was when I first came across his path 6 months ago.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Shannon is a part of our Learning Community Sub-Council 2 funds. We have that at just Kellam and Conestoga. So just a quick backdrop on the funding source for Shannon. We're also pleased to have our high school, 2 of our high school social workers here. We currently have social workers just in our high schools. So if I could introduce Stephanie Hazing and also Donna Hill.
Good evening. I'm Stephanie Hazing. I'm the school social worker at Northwest High School. And as members of the educational team, school social workers seek to strengthen the relationship between the student, home, community, and the school. The focus is on early identification and intervention for barriers impacting that student's academic success. Social workers in Omaha Public Schools are master's level trained social workers and also licensed mental health practitioners, meaning that we have the additional clinical training to address the mental health needs for both students and families. The social work perspective is unique in that we look at the whole student, their environment, and the circumstances to determine what is going on both within the school and outside of the school walls. Social work provides this support to students and families in a number of different ways.
As you can see on this slide, by assessing and supporting student family strengths and needs, we're very careful to assess a family within their full system and in a holistic approach. And to clarify, to make sure that we're on the same page, assessment looks a little bit different for social workers than it does for psychologists or for educators. Assessment for us means doing a biopsychosocial, which is another fancy term for you. But basically, as we're building a relationship with the student and the family, and we're establishing a confidential relationship with them, we're constantly assessing for safety, for their basic needs being met, their education status, their developmental stage, the family dynamics and generational concerns that might be there, housing, transportation, coping skills, mental health, substance abuse, and then taking that information and what they've identified as being problematic and helping them to start addressing those issues. So we start where they are at and where they need supports and where they've identified them.
Additionally, social workers can provide direct intervention to students. We know that students with untreated mental health issues may develop significant problems which can impact their educational success. School social workers are able to provide consultation and assessment to identify mental health needs, provide individual or group counseling, or connect the student with community mental health providers. School social workers are also skilled at providing crisis intervention and able to assess in both suicidal and threat assessment situations. An example of a student that we supported this year is a student in her final semester as a senior with 5 credits left to go, and she began to experience extreme anxiety in the school setting. And through further assessment and conversations with the student and the parent, we were able to determine that there had been a lapse in her therapy to address the anxiety and her medication due to the lapse in insurance. So as a social worker, I was able to work, one, to provide direct support and calming strategies for the student on a daily basis at school. Two, contact a Medicaid outreach worker who then worked with the parent to reapply for Medicaid. Three, I worked with a nurse practitioner in the school-based health center for the student to receive a 30-day supply of her medication at no charge. And four, we referred the family to therapy through the Methodist Community Counseling Program located at our school with no charge.
Another role is that we participate in IEP meetings as an advocate. We really come up alongside the families and students from the very beginning of the conversation. Once a teacher or a staff member or a parent has identified that they would like to pursue testing process to see if there's any additional needs that need to be met, we help explain that process. I don't know if you guys have realized the amount of acronyms that we have in the educational system, but I know coming in as a professional, I found it to be very overwhelming. So imagine being a parent sitting at an MDT meeting saying that their student does qualify for an IEP, for OHI, that they're verified and they're going to be placed in the BSP room, and they don't know what any of those things mean. And they all mean very important things. They're very charged words that we need to make sure that they understand so that they can continue to advocate for their child and make those best decisions and ask the questions that are needed. So we really come alongside them and provide general education to them throughout the process.
School social work services and supports can also be provided in relation to the student's IEP goals. The services could include individual or small group counseling, behavioral or social skills development, and social emotional assessment. A couple of examples of that would be, one, a student who is experiencing anger and physical outbursts, working to provide de-escalation in the moment with that student, calming them at that time, and then long-term working on a plan and educating them on anger management, helping them develop those skills so they can eventually regulate their own emotions. A second example would be a 17-year-old student with significant developmental disabilities who is approaching the age of majority and getting ready to complete their 12th grade year. We would be there to provide support to that parent to ensure a smooth transition to adult services, working with them to get referred to developmental disabilities services, working with them to get information on how to apply for a guardianship in the court system if that is applicable. Again, trying to make that smooth transition and keep the parent informed of the resources that are out there to assist them.
Speaking of referring students and families to resources in the school and in the community, obviously that's something that we're well known for. So after we've done our assessment and we're continuing to gather that information, we look to plug in our students and families to any internal resources we have and then external resources that we have. That's in hopes to continue to build upon their strengths and then of course address any of their unmet needs. When we're careful to not duplicate services, we are always collaborating, partnering, and sharing resources, many like that you heard from earlier in terms of the community partners that we have, just to make sure that we are fully supporting the family. A couple of examples that I can provide to you from work that I've done this year are teen parents. It's one thing to be a young person and be in at an at-risk situation in terms of graduating. It's another thing to be in a domestic violence relationship expecting a child of your own. So working with two expectant parents that are struggling with those dynamics. Working with students and families that are experiencing homelessness. I've worked not only from the side of the young person who wasn't able to pack their backpack up and get their assignments in their bag before they had to leave their home, but and doesn't have clean clothes to wear to school and wonders what their peers will say or what their teachers might think, and it's too embarrassing to tell them. And then I've got the mom in the main office, struggling to maintain control over her child while she feels out of control herself in terms of, feeling where she's at in terms of her life. So we get the opportunity to affect not only the students but the parents at a high level. Another example from this year is assisting in transition to guardians in times of death, medical decline, or incarceration. Unfortunately, that's something that happens frequently, and one of probably the most devastating requests that have been made of me in terms of my time that I've worked here is that at the end of a conversation with the parent, I said, is there anything else that I can do to help serve you or to help your child? And she said, well, can you find a place for her to live? And I said, I'm sorry? And she said, well, I didn't have a chance to tell you guys, but I'm actually going to be going on hospice care pretty soon, and I don't think I have anywhere that she can go live. So, being able to really quickly respond to imminent situations so that students have a place to live and they can then attend their schooling.
We know that students exhibiting behavior problems at school are in need of additional support. Social workers take that systems perspective and look at what is causing that behavior. and then work as a member of the team to develop effective strategies aimed at improving the student's behavior and reducing suspensions. For example, this year, a 10th grader transferred to the traditional high school setting from a residential treatment facility. With that change in structure, she had a difficult time, had multiple behavior problems at school, and also had multiple suspensions. We as the school pulled together as a team, including the administrator, the counselor, the IEP case manager, mom, the student herself, the therapist, and the probation officer from the community. Together as a team, we developed a plan to support this child's needs both in and out of school. We couldn't have done one or the other without the other piece in place.
And then we coordinate, obviously, with their students and families with multiple community agencies. We share the clinical language of the community, and so what we really hope to do is to try to equip our teachers, our educators, our administrators with what's going on and what does that mean, and bringing the language of the needs of the family into the classroom. We try to provide a consistent continuum of care from their home, their community, into the school, and make sure that we're sharing collateral data to make sure our students are prepared for success and that they can stay within their homes. A couple of examples I can provide to you in terms of coordinating this is transitioning a student back after a significant loss or death, a death of a sibling. When we help educate a teacher of what disengagement looks like as a result of grief, rather than just motivation and they're dropping out and they're losing interest in being in school, the lens of how that teacher approaches that student is very different. I also do a lot of work with supporting clinicians that do provide the long-term care for our students and families in terms of sharing treatment plan support. So if a student needs a safe pass to come, if they've been triggered from a trauma that they're receiving services for out in the community, that they can come and I can utilize the same calm down language to be able to refocus them so that they can go back to their day faster, and allows them to practice what they're working on in real life settings.
Finally, as social workers in the high school, we are excited by the idea of having social workers in both the elementary and middle schools. While high school social workers are available to feeder schools for consultation, we know that the actual social work presence would meet a lot of the student needs, and that we're actually missing some of the needs that we could be assisting with.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm just going to go through the next slides pretty quickly since I know that you have them in front of you. The research, these next two slides deal with the research on the impact of social work. Research does show that it reduces dropouts, provides training to school staff, addresses mental health issues. We know also from the research that only 1 in 5 students that need mental health support actually are able to get the services that they need. And so social workers in schools can help make sure that that percentage increases a little bit. Increases access to services for students with disabilities and students in other subgroups, increases positive student outcomes in school academically. Then, just to touch on this slide, the school social work program should help with the prevention of CPS intervention. And just to note, I think the most important thing on this slide is out of those 33,800 cases of alleged maltreatment that were made to CPS hotline, only 36% of those reports of child abuse and neglect were actually assessed. And then Dr. Kerber is going to talk about the cost.
We've adjusted based on the feedback we got from you last time and are just looking at the cost of the expansion in terms of the Sherwood dollars. We recognize that there can't be a commitment not knowing the future of school funding. And Sherwood has committed to $7.4 million for additional social workers. There's an attached document that gives that to you laid out over 4 years. It's not in the PowerPoint, but we did add that so you could clearly see how many are hired each year and what that means. And that would actually be, hopefully, if we had qualified candidates, 12 social workers this year. We wanted to close that number from 9 to 18 to more specific, so that would be 12 for this year, increasing by 8 next year, another 8 the following year, etc. The average salary, just to give you a sense, for a social worker is at $48,000, starting in the low 40s, topping out in the high 50s with many years of experience, low 50s with many years of experience. The last piece of information on that particular slide references the expansion plan is for 4 years, depending upon evaluation results and effectiveness of the programming, and of course the Sherwood funds, and that's just what we're looking at. And Sherwood will fund an external evaluator. There's more information in the template if you're interested about the external evaluation. We didn't put that into the PowerPoint. We'd like to jump after that right into next steps.
So you have this document also included, which is, what that shows you is our current OPS roles of a counselor, psychologist, and social workers in the high schools. So it gives you an idea of when a school has access to all three of those personnel in a school, how their roles might differ. Because sometimes people think that those roles are very similar, and in some cases they do overlap. So that middle section there shows you their shared responsibilities, and then you'll also see the differences as well. The work that needs to be done would be to look at if we have social workers in middle school and elementary, what do those role definitions look like at that level? Because that's going to be very different, because the work of a counselor is different in an elementary, so our role definitions would have to be different. And Sherwood would be providing an external facilitator to help guide those conversations and make sure that we have input from all of our current counselors and school psychologists, so that we can make sure that we are very sure that their input is represented, and we are very aware of all the things that they're doing, because we don't want to duplicate services. We want the social workers to provide unique services and not duplicate what's already going on. The next slide is an example of what Milwaukee Public Schools, how they have defined those roles. So it's just another example of how a school district has clearly identified for their staff the difference between counseling, psychology, and social work. So the additional next steps would be, we do have a criteria for schools to receive a social worker, and that will be based on high needs. So schools with the highest needs are schools that would receive social workers, and that would be based on free reduced lunch rates, academics, suspensions, and membership. We will be recommending that 12 social workers be hired for the 2016-17 school year. And then again, that those would be placed at schools with the highest needs. And then remembering that we already have social workers at the high schools, so those would not be, high schools would not be prioritized. Right now, Human Resources plans on hiring master level social workers. And then we would collaborate with staff development to ensure training for our social workers. One of the things, as you know, we've prioritized is MTSSB implementation to support the behavioral needs of our students. So this slide just gives you a little bit more detail about how social workers will support that implementation at each of the tiers, which at Tier 1 is basically providing professional development for staff so that staff can feel a little bit more empowered to deal with mental health issues in their classroom. Tier 2, providing group counseling or group therapy, teen pregnancy groups, assisting with some basic needs. And then at Tier 3 would be really looking at students with challenging behaviors and helping teams develop their functional behavior assessments, looking at self-injurious behaviors, doing any sort of suicide assessment. So really that highest tier, those most challenging students and the students with the greatest need, they would be dealing with and working with on an individual basis. So that is those slides really quickly.
And I'll just do a quick summary. We're requesting approval formally as an action item to accept provide a application which would allow us to accept a $7.4 million grant from the Sherwood Foundation for additional social workers over the next 4 years. Hiring additional social workers each year will be dependent upon the results of our external evaluation, so we're going to make sure we're doing it right and adding the appropriate number, but we've given you the targeted number we think would be reasonable for training and support over 4 years. And I want to emphasize there's no commitment from the district to increase or maintain the number of social workers after the life of the grant. Mr. Evans has worked with Sherwood. I've been in meetings with them, and they certainly understand and appreciate the position in terms of what was stated at the last board meeting. And we know that even 4 years in the life of a child can make a huge difference, and so we're submitting that as a 4-year request in terms of that budget paid we provided. And with that, I'll defer to Mr. Evans, and of course, any board members for any questions.
Well, hopefully, we've kind of answered those questions we heard in the last meeting and gave more clarity of the definition of the role and the definition of how it would work within our school district, and that was one of our big goals and targets, and also to give you some live practitioners to talk about some of their stories. So thank you for all that, and with that, I'll defer to questions.
Ms. Williams, did you have a question?
So first, I have a couple questions for our current social workers, so I'm going to ask them to come up. There was something that you said, one of you said, and as a parent at the high school level, what really draws me towards this is that we have a chance to keep students and families out of the system and offer some preventative services before kind of life spins out of control. And so just sharing those stories is huge. And I have to say, with my oldest, who was actually highlighted on this, I take a little point of personal privilege, of my own child, who is circled on this great Goodwill document. It would have been amazing for me as a mother of a student with a disability to have that social worker piece to help maneuver through that. And so I see the high school portion of how beneficial that could be for those students, especially as they're transitioning out into kind of their own independent world and having that good support system. And I just see there'd be huge benefits working so closely with the middle school and high school, or middle school and elementary school students now, how many lives this could really change. But my question to you is, currently at the high school level, what's the average number of students or families that you are working with? I can't daily, monthly, but what's kind of your average? Do you have an average kind of roster of families that you're working with ongoing?
I don't know that we have an average number. I mean, I'm at Northwest High School, so we have about 1,500 students. So, and it really varies on my level of involvement. It may be a one-time involvement with a student or parent that's problem solving and connecting them with a service. It may be an almost daily involvement with a special education, with a student with an emotional disturbance who is having a difficult time regulating their emotions. So I really have a hard time coming up even with a guesstimate. I think by the end of a school year, I know out of 1,500 that I have touched maybe 350.
Okay.
On different levels, though. But I also feel there probably are more students that I could reach. And I think every year that I've been in the high school setting, I've received more and more referrals from staff as they become familiar with what social work has to offer. They realize how we can be a benefit to the student and to the families.
Okay, and I know high school is going to be a lot different than elementary school, where you have smaller numbers at your elementary schools. However, that's important for us to see if we're going to approve this, how much effect that we can have on students' lives. And so...
And I can speak to Central if you would like. I think that we're always hovering around 2,400, and in the years that we've collected data in terms of keeping track of the students that we've served, I've usually been around 500 or 600, and again, a year. And that is very much aligned with what Stephanie said. It may be a one-time contact. It may be a very intensive contact. I think what's important to note now with being there after all of these years is that we work with some excellent partners in our school buildings. And so we've been able to educate them on fairly easy things to navigate and referrals to make and resources to connect to. And so our numbers, may not be accurate because we've also been educating staff on how to plug our students and families into other supports when they're meeting with them too, and without having to do a formal referral to us. And so I know that there's other numbers that just aren't represented in terms of what we keep track of.
And I think tracking those numbers more efficiently would definitely be a goal as we look towards expansion. That is something we recognize we're going to have to do a better job of doing.
And then just two other follow-up. What is your interaction with the student population at the high schools? And again, I know high school is going to be different than elementary, but are you engaged with students outside of working with them? Are they familiar with you? Do you have that presence in your prospective buildings?
We're very visible. I can speak for myself at Central, but I believe it to be true about the other settings as well. Our administrative team has welcomed us with open arms and then also encouraged us to be part of the day. So I'm out there, if I'm not meeting with a student or on the phone with someone, I'm out there doing hallway supervision. And so I'm just a general face as well as being someone who provides a direct service during the school hour in which a student comes to see me. So I'm utilizing a lot of different ways, attendance, team meetings, MTSSB meetings. But in terms of the students, there's a full range of students that I interact with for a professional reason, and then students that just see me as a helping, caring adult in the building.
And I think that helping, caring relationship ends up bringing more students to us. And, I can't tell you how many students that you meet on hall supervision or lunch duty or just throughout the day that eventually feel comfortable enough to approach you with an issue that's going on, or the students that we're working with closely who then bring in a friend who didn't want to talk about what was going on, but now because their peer has said, you know what, this is an okay person to talk to, they'll come in and actually talk about what's going on.
Okay, well, that's perfect. That's what I wanted to actually hear, because I think we will see more success with students and families having you be a kind of a part of that school culture, so that's very important. And then the only thing that I would like to see, pending this being approved, obviously, would be to come up with some transition plans. So if there's families at the elementary and they're moving to middle school, then being able to set up some plans so that when you hand those students over to the middle school person, they already are aware of what's going on, you've debriefed them. And if you have to go through high school, great, but if not, but I would like to see some transitions in there so that we can follow families and students to really give those support.
And those are things that we've already been taking part of. Obviously, we have some students that are highly mobile and highly high-risk students. And so within the 7 or 9 of us, each year, in terms of looking at where they've moved on to, we make those collateral contacts within each other just to make sure that they're aware of who's coming and what their needs are, so that there's as little as possible in terms of the gap of service and care.
And I think as we further define the social work program, that will be key. Those transition years we know are critical to students, so we'll need to figure out a good handoff procedure to make sure kids are not falling through the cracks as they transition from one level to another.
Great. Well, thank you for answering those questions and hearing everything I had to say. I am very much in support of this. I think we should do our due diligence to keep our students and families outside of the system as much as possible and keep them, going to school and being healthy and giving them those tools and resources. So thank you very much for the work that you do. And Ms. Shannon, is that right? Ms. Shannon, thank you very much. I had to go Kellam All-Stars.
Does anyone else have any other questions? Mr. Snow?
Thank you, Madam President. Dr. Kerber, you guys mentioned that this will be aligned with the MTSSB. So are we going to be identifying the schools based off of that plan? Because I know you guys had like a layout. Is it going to be exactly connected? I know some of the high schools are in there, so obviously there's going to be...
Yeah, not an exact connection, and let me explain why. The priority is our highest need, highest poverty schools first, and so that's going to be our schools at 90%, 80%, above 70% free and reduced lunch. So those have been prioritized first. Some of our Phase 1 MTSSB schools aren't quite that high. So they may have additional support from another person as we roll that out into the future. Now, in our first year, most of our MTSSB schools are at that poverty level, and they will probably be looking at social worker support. But I don't want to say all, in case there was a school at a 50% or 40% level for free reduced lunch.
No, that makes sense. I'm just saying, like, if this doesn't align, will MTSSB align to these schools that are now getting these social workers, which, it seems like they could be those master instructors of that type of method moving forward.
Yeah, and in fact, both of the individuals behind us are in the MTSSB leadership teams at their schools, so it's already evolved naturally. Yeah.
Perfect. I have 2 more questions. The elementary school piece and middle school piece is interesting. As high school, you get referrals from other students, or a student just walks in. It's it's probably a little bit easier getting in contact with the parent. As for an elementary school, how would that process go on really reaching a kid that doesn't want to say anything, and then the parent is not involved or engaged? I know in many of my cases where I work, I have a lot of the schools, elementary schools, that will call me because the parents' numbers change all the time, and they can't really interact with the kids, so then it's me having to fill that void. What's that piece going to look like in the elementary school setting?
One of the things we'll always do is a needs assessment at the beginning, and there's all kinds of different reports we can run. One of the reports we like to use a lot in our school district is called the indicator report. It has at-risk identifiers, so we know that some kids are more at likely or more at risk of needing additional supports. And then the second thing, of course, is our social workers can actually do their needs assessments, working with faculty, making sure they can identify. But you're right, the student may not walk in and announce they need help. It's the adult that has to reach out to the student. And I would love to defer to Mrs. Collins, Carrie, if you want to add some real-life examples from the building principal as you line up supports for kids. Similar, not the same exactly in terms of the certification, but our family support workers are doing a similar role, and we thought that might be helpful to hear, not just from high school, but elementary as well.
Yeah, many times if we don't have a parent who initiates support, it's all about building that relationship, and so we have no problem making home visits. I make a lot of home visits to families, and once they trust and see that you're there to make a positive impact on the family, more than likely they'll accept the support.
Thank you. And I'm just going to make a comment. I understand this is a 4-year grant. I've experienced people in my family, or as well as kids in my program, that have had a social worker. Social workers moved or died or passed on, and that kid went through the worst next year of their life. So if any way, a year from now, that the district tries to work a way that if this grant doesn't exist in 4 years, how are we going to continue this so it's not a complete disruption of services, especially for our most needy students that are in elementary school? Because by the time they come to high school, if there's been a drop in that social worker, you guys are chasing them around trying to get them to bleed back into the system.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I had one question on, you had mentioned the mental health training that the social workers we currently have at the high school level. Is that something we're looking at hiring individuals who have that mental health?
Yes.
Okay.
I think that's a pretty certification.
That's a pretty key piece, and not all social workers, have that piece of it. So I wanted to understand that, and then.
In fact, I'll let Mr. Wakefield respond to that.
And we would only hire social workers with a master's level license, and that's our standard for hiring all school social workers. School social work is a very unique subset of social workers. In Kansas, I was a principal. I had a school social worker. I heard last time we talked a little bit about CPS. CPS social workers are bachelor's-based social workers. They have a lot less training and a lot less specialization in what they do. And when we go out and hire a school social worker, we go out and get the very best to work with our kids.
I just wanted to confirm that at the elementary, middle school level, so I appreciate that very much.
As social workers, you can be the licensed master's level social worker, or you can be dually licensed as a licensed mental health practitioner additionally, which means we have that additional clinical training. And right now, all of the 7 social workers in the high school settings are dually licensed.
Okay.
And that would be the goal because of that mental health piece and being able to assess for and understand and provide that education to staff.
There's a big difference, so that's why I wanted to get clarification on that, and I appreciate that very much. Okay, Mr. Scanlon?
Could you go back one slide?
Sure.
Please?
Of course.
I guess I brought up some concerns that I had that I'm glad that were addressed as far as the district committing to funds, because I know as Connie's taken on the role of CFO, she's finding a number of different things. I'm not arguing that the money wouldn't be well spent. I'm just wondering if we'd have the money, because there's a lot of other commitments that we have out there that, funding and everything, I don't think that it's wise for us to commit to, saying, yeah, in 4 years, we'll pick it up and we'll run with it. But I would agree with Mark Snow with the, we got to understand if there are no funds available, we need to come up with a contingency plan, whether it's a third party that can help with funding, or, we need to be very attentive to what's in our budget, because, not to mention a certain pension program that it's got a heck of a shortfall. I'd hate to see that take funding away from things that I think that the social workers are very effective, but I mean, there's a lot of moving parts and limited dollars, so.
Can I say thank you, Mr. Scanlon, for your attention to our pension plan? As someone who's closer to the end in 10 years than I am from the beginning, I will add, because of your question last time, we did review, Mr. Evans asked that we looked at all of our Sherwood grants, and out of all of them, we only had 8 science teachers that were FTEs that have no guarantee of future funding, 1 reading teacher, again, no guarantee of future funding, and then 1 partnership program person who's coordinating a teammates program, just to give you a sense of those grants as they end. And we did double check. They were hired under that understanding.
Okay, and then if you could go back one more slide, I think it was, where there was a bullet that it said that there would be an external audit or review of the effectiveness of this program and this grant. I think that's also very important.
Yeah,
for
it's the very bottom of that list.
For the public to understand that, we're going to, which Sherwood is generously funding as well, an external evaluation to see if we are making a difference with this program. So I think that's a responsible way to move forward if this does get approved.
Okay, with that, at this time, I would entertain a motion to, I think, are you actually, it's the application of the grant to the Sherwood Foundation, is that right?
That is
so,
the request.
Giving the district the authority to work with the Sherwood Foundation on expanding social workers within the Omaha Public Schools through a grant.
So move.
Second.
So motion by Mr. Snow and second by Ms. Williams. Is there any other conversation, discussion, questions among board members? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Snow. Aye. Vargas.
Aye.
Wayne. Williams.
Aye.
Fay.
Aye.
Goding.
Aye.
Scanlon.
Aye.
7-9.
Motion carries. With that, I would like to mention that in receipt of reports, there's a report on the refugee ELL population, and so we have lots of conversation about that, and I've had conversation about folks tonight that fall in those categories, so I would encourage everyone to read that. And with that, Ms. Williams.
I move that the Board of Education go into closed session for the protection of the public interest and for the prevention of needless injury to the reputation of individuals to discuss with the superintendent, secretary to the board, legal counsel, Mark Warnicki, and Dr. Turnquist, real estate, pending litigation, negotiations, and legal advice.
Is there a second?
Second.
Who said second? Mr. Scanlon? Okay. So motion by Ms. Williams, second by Mr. Scanlon. A roll call, please.
Vargas.
Aye.
Wayne. Williams.
Aye.
Fay.
Aye.
Goding.
Aye.
Scanlon.
Aye.
Snow. 7-9.
Motion carries.
7-9.
With that, let me remind the board that the purpose for closed session is for the protection of the public interest and for the prevention of needless injury to the reputation of individuals, to discuss with the superintendent, secretary of the board, legal counsel, Mark Warnicki, and Dr. Turnquist, real estate, pending litigation, negotiations, and legal advice. Let the record reflect that the board went into closed session at 11:36 p.m.